Shalom, family. Good to see you all here. Hope you're doing well. Well, today the birthright citizenship went before the Supreme Court and they made a ruling, but that ruling was against Donald Trump. Donald Trump said the 14th Amendment was about the children of the enslaved, and it did not apply to everybody. But the Democrats, they have been using it to justify bringing in all of these illegals. So, as of today, people that had a child from other countries here in the U.S., they are considered citizens. So that was the ruling. Now, believe it or not, the one that didn't agree with the ruling was Clarence Thomas. I was like, whoa. I actually agree with him, but he did not agree with the Supreme Court. He did not think it should apply to everybody. I'm shocked. So, anyway, y'all, there are some people that are really upset about the ruling. But if we know Donald Trump the way that we do, we know he ain't going to give up on this, y'all. He's going to present this again. He may have to present it in a different way, but this is far from gone. He will definitely find a way to put this in front of the court again. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, please give me a one if you can see my screen. Thank you.
Is your legal breakdown of the birthright citizenship cases and the other cases issued by the Supreme Court today, June 30th. The Malloy and Real Life I Don't Play Well on Television. And here we go. The Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision upheld birthright citizenship, saying that children born in the United States to immigrants are subject to U.S. jurisdiction and are citizens at birth under the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause. Donald Trump's executive order is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court just struck down the limits on what political parties can spend coordinating with their candidates. A single donor usually can only donate $7,000. Now they can donate $550,000 to a victory fund that can be distributed to candidates by a political party. This was a 6-3 decision decided on First Amendment grounds. In the final case, the Supreme Court ruled that Title IX lets schools run sex-separated teams defined by biological sex, that equal protection isn't violated by limiting girls' teams to biological females. Schools may set eligibility by biological sex. Those are the final rulings for this term. Let me know what you think in the comments and share, follow, like for more legal analysis. So I'm going to be breaking down all of these cases in depth.
So this, if I understand it correctly, Patty, essentially came down to an interpretation of part of one line.
It does. It's the jurisdiction thereof that's in the 14th Amendment. It gets a little bit obscure there. I have to say, in all the Supreme Court cases I've covered, this is by far the thickest document deciding birthright. So let's take a step back. This was on Donald Trump's first day in office of his second term. He established an executive order. What he wanted to do was limit birthright citizenship. In essence, that would mean if you were here on a work visa and you had a baby, that baby was no longer American. If you were here with undocumented as an undocumented immigrant, and you gave birth, the mother gave birth, the father was not an American, then that baby was not American. That would have defied the 14th Amendment, which was established to make sure that the children of freed slaves would be considered Americans. So it was more than 100 years of precedent. Supreme Court when they heard this argument, seemed very skeptical. Let's not forget Donald Trump was the first U.S. sitting president to come and listen to the oral arguments, leaving fairly quickly after he started hearing some dissent. He often claims that the U.S. is the only country that allows birthright citizenship, which means any child born on U.S. soil is in fact an American citizen. That is not the case. There are dozens of countries that do allow birthright citizenship. Still, he tried to limit it. The Supreme Court, in a very strong decision, simply said, no, you can't. That's against the 14th Amendment.
The Supreme Court decision is a major defeat for President Trump. This is it right here. It is called Trump versus Barber. That is the decision that was undertaken by the Supreme Court today. What they said was that the executive order signed by the president on his very first day in office was essentially unconstitutional because it challenged the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. This is the amendment of the Constitution that guaranteed citizenship to the children and enslaved people after the Civil War. That is something that has been part of American law and American jurisprudence ever since. A lot of other nations, contrary to the president's claims, do have birthright citizenship as part of their national fabric. Now, what the president tried to do with the order was restrict birthright citizenship, not eliminate it entirely, but require that the parents of a child born on U.S. soil essentially be in the process of becoming U.S. citizens or U.S. citizens themselves. The court rejecting that argument today. This is something the president put a lot of political weight behind. Back in April, he appeared before the Supreme Court, actually as an observer in the courtroom, listening to the arguments being made in this case. It has been part of his immigration policy and his immigration crackdown ever since he took office. And today, the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot do that. It is a major defeat for the President of the United States when it comes to his immigration agenda.
It was an immediate eruption, a roar of cheers. We saw a lot of people who had been standing here in the shade waiting for this decision rush over. Some who had just come to see this for the day to figure out what might happen. Individuals really wanted to be here for this historic moment where the Supreme Court struck down this very unusual, broad executive order that President Trump put in place the first day he was in office. It had not actually been enacted, but there were people here who genuinely wondered if today might be the day that the Supreme Court would end birthright citizenship. Of course, the Trump administration had argued that it had the ability to do that because of that case that Laura mentioned based on children who were born to Chinese immigrants. The Trump administration said that those parents were domiciled in the United States, meaning they had lived here, and so that anyone who was here temporarily or illegally did not have the right to make children born to them U.S. citizens. But we've heard a lot of people, a big crowd gathering over here. We expect there to be press conferences throughout the day and later this afternoon where these crowds will grow larger. And we will also perhaps expect to hear from some people who are upset about this decision, who do think that the citizenship should only go to people who are permanently legally in the United States or U.S. citizens, that they've been listening to what the president has said on this issue and that they believe that they should limit citizenship.
Trump is absolutely furious right now. Moments ago, the United States Supreme Court upheld birthright citizenship, going against Donald Trump's executive orders to end it. The 63 ruling means that anybody born in the United States is still a U.S. citizen. Too bad for the racist bigots.
This is a hugely consequential moment for our constitutional structure, a landmark ruling from the Supreme Court striking down one of the most controversial moves the president has made in this second term. It was a move that no other president had tried to do before, essentially rolling back a right guaranteed under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, a right to have citizenship guaranteed automatically, no matter the status of your parents, no matter if they are undocumented, no matter if they are here temporarily, if you are born on U.S. soil, the 14th Amendment says that you get citizenship automatically, full stop. Now, the court, of course, has been looking at this for quite some time. In fact, they took this up last term, but they didn't wade into the merits. This time, they went all the way and they had to get into the actual heart of the issue, if you will, and take on that constitutional question that had been resolved dating back to the 1890s. The Supreme Court looked at this case in the case of a Chinese immigrant, someone whose parents were born abroad, but was born in San Francisco. And in that case, back in the 1890s, the court said that person had enjoyed birthright citizenship. And that had been the law of the land since that time until the President Trump, tried to undo that by an executive order passed on his very first day of his second term. It's a case that he has cared deeply about. It's a case that he has called a disgrace, birthright citizenship. In fact, he showed up to the Supreme Court, the first sitting president to do that in history, showed up to face down the justices. But today they told him no, Craig. And so I'm now going to dig into the actual content of that opinion.
In a major blow to Donald Trump and his administration, the Supreme Court has just ruled that regardless if you're here in the United States illegally or temporarily, if you have a child here in the United States on U.S. ground, that baby is a U.S. citizen. Which was done in a 6-3 decision in which the justices did say that this falls under the 14th Amendment, aka birthright citizenship, shutting down Donald Trump's executive order. Chief Justice Roberts said in his opinion, quote, "Citizenship then and now was the right to have rights, to freely participate in our political community. The framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every free-born person in this land." Adding later, "We keep that promise today." Trump has not commented on this just yet, though on Truth Social, he did talk about two other opinions that were released today. First one when it came to political spending, in which the justices did say there were no limits on. And he praised the Supreme Court for upholding some state laws in which it banned transgender women and girls from playing in sports. Saying big win, the United States Supreme Court just ruled against men playing in women's sports. Wow, that takes that ridiculous situation off the table.
And it's a big one. It has to do with birthright citizenship. It was an executive order that President Trump, on day one of his second term in January 2025, signed the executive order. It was immediately challenged. And now we can tell you that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled against President Trump's order to limit birthright citizenship. Shannon, we have talked for some time about the president feeling that he would not win on this one. The question is, why not?
Okay, right off the bat, it says children born in the United States to parents unlawfully or temporarily present are, quote, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are citizens at birth under the 14th Amendment's Citizenship Clause. So look how this broke down. As we expected, the Chief Justice wrote this opinion. Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, Barrett, and Jackson joined. Jackson has a concurring opinion in which Sotomayor joins. Justice Kavanaugh files an opinion concurring in the judgment and dissenting in part. The dissent comes from Justice Thomas. He is joined by Gorsuch, Alito, and then Justice Gorsuch apparently has his own dissenting opinion. So it is what we expected after the arguments here, and it looks like a bit of a split, but enough of a plurality coming together to say that the executive order that the president issued very quickly upon taking office is no good, and that if people are here, subject to the jurisdiction thereof includes people who are here illegally. The writing for the majority, Chief Justice Roberts says this: citizenship then and now was the right to have rights to freely participate in our political community. Talking about the 14th Amendment, the framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every freeborn person in this land. That's a quote, and it looks like it's a quote back to some of the legislative debate about this in Congress. He says we keep that promise today. So a loss probably expected by the Trump White House, but it is official and it's a thick one. So we'll keep reading.
All right, y'all. So, Donald Trump lost this one. I know there were a lot of people hoping that it would have been a win for Donald Trump, but no. But like I said, y'all, just keep your eye on this going into even 2027. This will definitely he'll definitely try to present it. He might present it again in a different way. But he's the type of person that if he don't get what he wants from a judge, he just goes to another one. That's his usual pattern. So y'all, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. Thank you so much for being here. And I do have another live coming up. So it's on a poll that was recently taken on why most Black Americans don't fly the American flag at their house. So I think it's like 10 out of 10 of us in our community, only 3 people will fly the American flag and the rest of us won't. So we'll get into that and listen to different people from our community speak on why they don't fly that flag. And I even got an old clip of Fannie Lou Hamer speaking about the American flag. So I will see you at 5:45. Thank you for being here. I think that's what LTMXUA Massage. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Lisa Cabrera, greetings and salutations to you. Peace and blessings to you and the family. And thank you so much for your support. I deeply appreciate it. And everybody have a wonderful afternoon and stay cool. Shalom, family.